All right, a couple more trickling in, but we'll get started. If you haven't gotten to take the poll, I'm going to close it in just a couple seconds. But this is the first in a remote work series of webinars that Virtual Systems is doing. We're talking about Office 365 data management strategies. So my name is Dirk Ahrens. I'm the president at Virtual Systems. My counterpart, Justin, I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, hey there. My name is Justin Drew, and I'm an inside systems engineer at Veeam, specializing in the VCSP program, basically just the cloud side. Perfect.
Cool. So here's the result. We're just kind of having some fun with some polling on working remotely, but how often are you wearing sweatpants right now, or shorts, or whatever? So I'll stop sharing that. So Virtual Systems is a VCSP, a cloud service provider, and we do cloud solutions. So we want to help our customers just kind of learn what's going on with cloud. This is a series about data management in Office 365. So if you jumped onto this webinar for Feeding America, thank you for doing that. You notice maybe that we're not doing any giveaways on Amazon gift cards here or anything else, but we wanted to just kind of find a way to give back to the community. We're going through a lot right now. This is a crazy time, and hopefully you found this webinar through maybe social media, maybe an email, but hopefully you saw that one way to kind of give back might be to plug into this webinar. And if you don't know Feeding America, we got people on this webinar from all over the country, and there's a good chance that they're doing something right down the street from you. So in IT, we're in this business of resource allocation. We're thinking about how many cores does this database server get, or how much storage do we put on that server, or how many users need this license. And Feeding America is also in that game of resource allocation. And all of a sudden, we're in this pandemic where restaurants are shut down, and we're trying to figure out where does the glut of fresh food go and livestock. I had a buddy who bought a pig the other day for $150 from a farmer who is trying to get rid of like 3,000 pigs because his supply chain is tied up in the restaurant industry. And so they're in this business, Feeding America is in this business of getting resources to people who need it, especially in this time when we've got some resource allocation issues. And what I think struck a chord with us at Virtual Systems and Veeam is that they're doing that in particular with kids who weren't able to go to school and maybe get some of their meals that they had counted on. So we said, hey, let's put together a webinar where we drive traffic to this webinar, and we give money for everybody who wants to show up. So if that's why you came in today, just appreciate you seeing that and being part of that, and want to challenge you to keep finding ways to do that in your community. So our goal today is just kind of, we're going to go through this topic and hopefully you learn some things. We're going to do it kind of classroom style. There's going to be some polls, some other fun stuff going on. But the goal is really for you to learn. Hopefully we get to learn some things as we go through here and give you just a good idea of how to manage your data in Office 365, what's your responsibility, what Microsoft does, whether you need to bolt on additional tools. There is a little bit of a sales component to this. So you'll see some pricing and stuff, but hopefully you come away learning some things. So next slide, Virtual Systems. So if you don't know us, this is what we're about, delivering intelligent technology and unparalleled service. So I mentioned at the beginning, we're a cloud service provider. We want to plug our customers into great cloud solutions. A lot of that is stuff we build in our own data centers, but a lot of it is stuff that we kind of build in public cloud stuff like AWS and Azure and others. And so, but our goal is just to let customers know, hey, here's what's going on in cloud. Here's what might work for you. Here's what might not. And we want to do that in a way that is terrific from a people perspective. We want to take care of our customers and deliver a top shelf customer experience. So here we are at a glance. We started, this is a good conversation over beer sometime, but we started as an internet service provider in 2003, just building out some rural networks where they didn't have internet. We did that for a lot of years and then sold that portion of the business off after we started growing up a cloud solution provider inside of that company. So I mentioned we've got some of our own data centers. So we've got a 3 data center footprint plus the public cloud. We got customers all over in every state and 10 Canadian provinces. So what else they have? Territories up in Canada, and I don't think they got 3 territories in addition to the provinces. We're not in all of those. We are a VMware Cloud Verified partner, which means that, so we build the solutions primarily in VMware environments. We also do Hyper-V. But we're one of VMware's top partners. So the top 3% of their partners globally get this badge called Cloud Verified, and it just means that you're awesome at doing cloud solutions. So we're pretty proud of that. You can see our affiliate partners down there. If you're wondering, hey, how does Virtual Systems build cloud solutions? We do it with Veeam, who's on with us today, Microsoft, Dell, Wasabi, and then some of our customers you see there. So Justin can intro some Veeam.
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. So this is just some of our bona fides, if you will, for those that aren't too familiar with Veeam. So we're originally from 2006 is when we got started. We were one of the first big players in backing up VMs. That was kind of our initial push. But since then, we've expanded into backing up pretty much everything else, including Office 365, which is the topic of today. Currently, we work with 66% of the Global 2000 and also 81% of the Fortune 500. And we just got, hundreds of thousands of customers in almost 200 countries at this point, with more and more coming on every month. Last year, we did finally cross 1 million in bookings. I think we were the 34th company to do that in a 10-year period, so we're pretty proud of that. And also, we do like to tout our NPS score, our Net Promoter Score. It's really just a fancy way of saying that customers really love the product and also the support that they get along with it. So you'll note that Netflix is at 68, and I think we're all pretty big fans of Netflix. We've somehow got a higher score than them, so really popular with the user base. So yeah, long story short, just a well-established company in the backup industry, and we love helping people protect their data.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that NPS thing because I came from Verizon, and our target at Verizon for NPS, Net Promoter Score, was 45. That was our target. And they basically, you just put out a poll that says, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love us? Some version of that. And only 9s and 10s are promoters. Those are the only scores you want to get. And so they've got a kind of straightforward but fancy way of putting that score together. And Veeam 75 is a big deal. They do a better job than any company I've seen at taking care of customers. So save Virtual Systems, who also does an amazing job. I'm gonna launch another poll, just kind of a funny one, but go ahead and do that, and then I'm gonna get into just a primer on cloud. So it's kind of good to talk from the same framework when we're talking about cloud and cloud applications like Office 365, but here's your ways to consume cloud. So you look at AWS and Azure, and there's generally 3 different ways to kind of think about how you consume the cloud if you're putting your applications there or your data. You can do it infrastructure as a service style, which is really the kind of the nitty-gritty of computing. So you're buying the CPU and RAM and the disk space and and mostly some of the networking and bandwidth. From there, you're putting everything on it. You're putting an OS on it. You're putting all your applications there. You manage everything. So that's the highest management version of cloud. Then you've got platform as a service, which is really you look to your cloud provider to deliver the whole platform. So your operating system included. You say, as an IT manager, maybe you say, hey, I don't want to manage much of this. I just want to manage my applications for my end users. So I need a Windows OS and I need servers that are about this size or that size. And that's generally thought of as platform as a service. And then last is the one that you're probably pretty familiar with, that most people are, and that's SaaS, software as a service. So really, who was it? Salesforce was the company who really kind of came in and started delivering this in a big way and turned everybody's head to say, wow, this is a great way to consume applications. They just deliver the infrastructure, the software, everything is right there. And that's what we're talking about here with Office 365 and 365 Data, is that SaaS model of consumption. So you get to kind of not think about how to manage that application at all, because it's kind of managed for you. But that said, obviously that comes with maybe some differences in the way we define managing that application and where that data goes. And that's what we're going to dig into today. So here's a cool survey that ESG did last year. So the question is, that came, it's on the left-hand side there. What applications that are running on-prem, and this was delivered last year to customers, get the highest priority to move to the public cloud? And you can see Office productivity, so your Office 365, your G Suite stuff, almost half of IT teams who've got on-prem stuff are thinking of moving that to the cloud. So really we're talking about, I think it's been that way the last few years, but we're talking about the biggest application set to be moving into the cloud right now with Office 365 and the productivity suite. So here's a really interesting question, and I hope you can see some of the questions there at the bottom, or some of the answers. But the question that came out to applicants, and it went to about 2,100 businesses, and the question was this: what's your organization's primary protection strategy for Office 365? The biggest answer was, we don't back it up, we don't really do anything. So almost 55% said, hey, we don't really do anything. The next biggest answer was, we rely on Microsoft's native tools for backup and recovery. And they are very skinny, Microsoft's native tools. I think we can say that there are some native tools there for managing your data. There is nothing there for backing it up, but there are some tools there for archiving and doing some other things. So by and large, and this is Veeam's point here on this survey, they conducted the survey, 74% of businesses are really left in kind of an unproductive or unprotected state. You can see in the poll that about 1,000 people skipped the question. So this came in a survey, probably people were getting whatever, $20 gift cards to do this survey. And 1,000 people skipped. So I would bet that there's a fair number, this is me just playing psychologist, but there's a fair number of people who skipped who also would have fallen in that category. Maybe that number would have come up if they would have answered. So, but I'd say at least 74% are left unprotected. So let's jump into the shared responsibility mode, because we're talking about SaaS applications where Microsoft is managing some stuff, and that's part of the benefit of SaaS, kind of what we talked about before. But there's going to be a difference in how you require that as a business. You require that data to be managed, and how Microsoft is actually doing it. Veeam has kind of started talking about this dialogue around, and Microsoft too, shared responsibility. So Microsoft's going to do some stuff. As a customer, you're going to do some stuff. So let's dig into what that looks like. And Justin, you can go ahead with these.
Perfect. Yeah, so let's kind of start off here with the sort of the basic customer perception. And that's just, why do I need to back this up? Microsoft is going to take care of everything, obviously. I mean, I'm paying for this service, so they're going to protect my data, right? And the next slide will address that. If we go to the next one. So yeah, the thing is, the reality of the situation is that they're just taking care of the infrastructure and the software. So they'll make sure that you can get into your account. They'll make sure their servers are up and running. They'll make sure that the software isn't, crashing or anything like that. But it's just a guarantee of uptime. The data itself is actually not part of what they're protecting. So it's really up to you to go through and implement some sort of way of creating an external place to back up all this data. Because if you do lose that data, and that could be, somehow you get cryptoed, someone maliciously deletes something or accidentally does, there's only a certain number of recycling bins and archives that you can go through before it's completely gone. And we'll touch on that in a few slides, kind of elaborate on that. But yeah, the big thing here is the impetus is on the customer to protect their data. So let's go to the next slide and talk through the shared responsibility model and the different things that are going on here. So first and foremost, the primary responsibility. So like I said, it's pretty much just uptime that they're guaranteeing. They're selling you software as a service, so that software must be up and running at all times for them to meet their SLAs. The data, though, falls under your responsibility. Accessing it, controlling it, backing it up, all that good stuff. Now, there is some supporting technology. So on Microsoft's side, they do have data replication. So you do have data center to data center geo-redundancy. You do have a recycling bin. So if you do accidentally delete something, you have a chance to get that back. But, it's not a backup by any means. Now, back to your responsibility. You do need to get a copy of this data somewhere just to be safe. And also, let's kind of talk about retention. Short-term, long-term, you name it, you can go and define your own retention independent of whatever Microsoft's tools are when you implement a backup solution. Now, in regards to security, yeah, they'll make sure that it's safe. Physical security, they got locks on the doors, they got security guards posted. You can't get into their data centers. Logical security. you can go through and make sure you can't get into it without, proper credentials and things like that at the app level and user level. Really, it's just making sure that only authorized access either to the building itself or the service itself is going to be provided. Now, data level, you've got to protect against accidental deletion, malicious insider attacks, employee retaliation, evidence tampering. If you're in the legal world, that's a legit thing. And also external ones, ransomware, malware, hackers, rogue apps. There's a myriad of things that are out there trying to compromise your data. And last but not least, regulatory. So you do have the role as a data processor that Microsoft is doing. They comply with data privacy, regulatory controls, industry certifications, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, all the standard stuff that they're kind of legally required to do. But depending upon your particular industry and things like that, you may have your own regulations that you need to enforce. And there might just be internal best practices from your legal or compliance officers and things like that. So again, it is really a shared model where Microsoft is signing up for certain things, and you've more or less got to fill in the gaps for everything else. And next one. Okay, so kind of beating a dead horse here, but yeah, there's primarily 6 reasons why you do need to have your Office 365 backup. First and foremost, accidental deletion. Things occur, people delete something they think they're not going to need, they don't think about it for a month or two, and then they go, oh shoot, I did need that, can I get that back? And if you don't have a backup, you can't get that back. Retention policy, confusion, gaps. People kind of assume that Microsoft is going to keep this forever, or at least 6 months, a year, something like that. Depending upon when you delete and things like that, it is going to age off and get permanently deleted after a set amount of time. And then both the internal and external security threats we already touched on, the legal and compliance requirements, and also just managing hybrid deployments and migrations, make it a little bit easier. So next slide. So this is another little survey that we did. So the most common one, user error accidental deletion. It just happens. Like I said, people don't think they need something, and then they realize they do. Hold on, there we go, perfect. Security threats, retention gap policies. It's just all the big ones. There are other specific reasons, but those are the big 3 in what we've seen from our end users. And on the next one, we can kind of go into, I got a poll question. There we go. Yeah, so let's kind of talk through this one. This is what Microsoft is providing with the standard deal that they sell to everybody. So you'll note that a lot of the stuff is not going to be there forever. So let's kind of start at the top and work our way down. So for our inbox and folder data, we've got 2 years before moving to archive. That's a decent amount of time, but you might want to have that a little bit longer. Delete items are for just a month, and then they're permanently deleted, and that can be a problem. Auto archive data for 1 month before moving to the archive. Let's see, we got deleted SharePoint online sites that stay in the first stage recycling bin for a month. 2 more in the second stage, and then they're finally deleted at 3. Same for your OneDrive files. And also, people don't realize this. If an employee leaves the company, they're retained for a month, and then they're permanently deleted because they're no longer actively registered as a user. So that's a big one that people don't pick up on and can kind of bite you if you don't realize it. So on the next slide, let's kind of point something out here. So the average length of time data compromise to discovery is over 140 days, and you're going to note that these are protected for typically 30 to 90 days, and that's a big problem. That's kind of the primary reason we keep pushing the need for a backup. So on the next one, let's kind of go through the challenges that we're experiencing here, and also what we can do with Veeam. So I'm not going to read the entire slide, but again, Microsoft's not the data owner. You have to go through and own that data and be responsible for it. Also, archiving is not a backup. I cannot stress that enough. A backup is an entirely separate place with a separate set of that data, so that if the original one goes away, you've still got that. Replicated copies are constantly updated from a single source. So if it's deleted or corrupted or changed a certain way, you are at risk. And also litigation hold. It does have a use, but it's still not a backup. So please don't try to depend on that. Now with Veeam, if we just bring it over here, it's really just emphasizing the control that you get. So you can go through and implement whatever you want. You'll have an actual backup. You can pick a repository where you want to store it. You can move that data wherever you want once you've got it backed up. And we are just an industry leading in recovery for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive. And we also grab a lot of the Teams data too if you guys have converted over to that. And then we just got tens of thousands of organizations. And in fact, this slide's a little outdated. We're probably closer to 100K at this point on how many people are using the product. It's our most, I shouldn't say the most, it's the fastest growing one by leaps and bounds, like 100+% year over year. And on the next one. So this is kind of where the solution comes into place. So you implement a solution with Veeam. Now you can control how long that stuff stays there. So you got your inbox data. You can keep that forever if you want. Or maybe you have, just certain roles for certain people. Maybe the C-level people need to be kept forever. Legal and finance might have an obligation to be kept for 10 years. And then rank and file, maybe you just need that for like 3 or 4 or 5 years or something like that. So you can go through and implement whatever scheme you need and just protect all those critical assets that you've got hosted in the software as a service that they're providing. Now on the next one, so this is kind of using Microsoft's own words against them. I don't think they realize what they're implying here when they put this on their website, but it is your data. You own it, you control it. They are not going to do that for you. They're just going to make sure you have access to it. If it goes away, it goes away. Microsoft's still getting paid for the number of users they're licensed for either way. So they're not super concerned with protecting your data above and beyond, the minimum of meeting the security requirements. And on the next slide, we have another thing we like to point out. So over here, point-in-time restoration of mailbox items is out of the scope of the Exchange service. So that's one thing we do like to point out with the backups that we're doing. These are point-in-time captures. So if you've got a particular item that has had several revisions over the course of time, we can always go and roll back to where it was, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever it may be. We're more or less just creating a new increment of that particular item that we've backed up. And then if you do need to go back and see how it existed at that point in time, we can just easily spin everything up at that date and then restore from there.
And that goes, I will say, as a service provider who helps customers recover from events when they either lose or something happens to their Office 365 data. I'll say that one comes up probably more times than I thought it would, where a customer says, hey, we have the final copy of this document, but that's not right. Something happened to it at some point along the line, and we don't know what happened to it. Can we see what it looked like 3 months ago or 6 months ago? And as we've seen a lot more customers start getting data into SharePoint, OneDrive. I mean, obviously that doesn't happen with emails, but in the SharePoint and OneDrive world, we see that quite a bit. So that's a really cool one.
Yeah, no, I'm very guilty of that when I'm drafting documentations and things like that, that I accidentally change something and then want to roll it back and don't have the capacity to. So it's a good feature to have.
Yep.
Yep. And then on the next one. So we do want to point out, and this isn't just blowing smoke, we have done some independent testing. So we have increased the backup speed for SharePoint and OneDrive by 30 times faster. Spoilers, what we did underneath the hood is we realized that we can more or less play whack-a-mole with Microsoft and their throttling. So when you start pulling stuff down, they're going to start throttling you after a certain point. And we realized if you just add more service accounts, we could just go from account A to account B to account C, just move it all around. And we just drastically improved the capabilities. So if you're worried about pulling that data down, we can get it real fast for you now. And the next few slides are more or less just kind of improvements, and we can talk to them. So increased security. I don't know if this has changed due to the coronavirus situation that we have going now, but they were going to be getting rid of the legacy authentication this October. So do be aware that multi-factor authentication will be required, and we have added support for that just to make sure that we're kind of ready and positioned for when that that transition and cutover occurs later this year. So do know that we can be extra safe when we go and access your data. The next one. Enhance visibility analytics. Really, it's just a way we can go through and pull up different reports and make sure that we are protecting all the data that we're signed up to protect. So it's an easy way to go through and verify all that and make sure that we're meeting our SLAs for you. And next. So yeah, just kind of a summary, not to go and repeat the same thing over and over, but you do need to go through, implement a solution. We highly recommend partnering with virtual systems and doing with us. If you don't go with us, please still protect it. This is very critical data. Just make sure you are backing this up somewhere, because you are going to encounter a scenario at some point in the future where you need to go and find this external to the O365 environment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and I appreciate, Justin, the way that you said it there. You know, obviously, I mentioned at the beginning, there's a sales component to this webinar, but really the thrust of what we want to do is just educate. So go ahead and Google Office 365 Backup. You're going to find a bunch out there. And full disclosure, you'll find some stuff that's cheaper than Veeam. It's not as good, but it's cheaper. Veeam has been the best tool that we have seen, and as a cloud service provider, I kind of mentioned at the beginning, we feel like at Virtual Systems, it's our job to know what's out there and to educate our customers. And there is not a tool more robust at managing data in Office 365 than Veeam. And I have seen customers, we're doing an onboard of a 10,000 user customer right now who vetted solutions better than I've seen any business vet solutions. We worked with this guy for months. You know, as he really took Veeam through its paces, along with a couple other tools, and loved it. You know, it passed every test. So it's really fun to be part of that process as a cloud service provider and get on these regular calls and hear somebody say, hey, I tried this, I did this thing, and it was awesome. It worked as well as I thought it would. So just a very robust tool, but really, you know, sales agenda aside, it's just a great idea to put something in place for your data, whether you do it with Veeam or not. Look at some solutions because it's not Microsoft's responsibility to manage that data for you. So, oh, and this is my slide, so I can keep talking. So if you are interested in the Veeam solution, I noticed there's, you know, we had probably a little over 150 people this morning who registered for the webinar. I saw quite a few that were under 100 user or 100 employee companies and quite a few who are over. So here's some pricing just to give you a ballpark, just so you kind of know, and you can float this out in your own research if you're going to, you know, Google some other providers or other solutions. But this is a per user, per month, all-in cost, or per year if you're looking at the right-hand column. And really kind of back to our conversation about SaaS consumption, you know, this is the whole like software as a service. So I just want to plug this in, and I want it to do everything for me. And I want to call somebody if I have to recover anything. So that's this model. When we start getting over, and I mentioned we do some pretty big deployments here at Virtual Systems, when we start getting over, it makes more sense to start customizing off of this pricing model. And we can get that cost down quite a bit in doing that. We split off the storage cost and the licensing cost from each other, and we manage them both separately, or you manage them separately, and we can get lower. But hopefully this just kind of gives you an idea. If you do want to take next steps on this, Chris Gates is on our team. You see his email down there at the bottom. That's a good one. You'll get a follow-up email from this webinar too, with the recording. So I've seen some people throwing some questions in the Q&A section. This would be a great time to throw more in there. And we will put out a follow-up email with the webinar link, as well as the Q&A that comes out of this. So you can kind of see and continue to do research from there. But this, you know, again, kind of the all-in cost monthly or annually with support. And so it's really, you know, you can see, hopefully you get that sense it's a very reasonable cost solution for what it gives you. And that's the ability, as businesses are getting all their data up in Office 365 and a lot of times getting rid of on-prem servers almost entirely for data, you know, it gives you the ability to still maintain full control over something that, you know, Microsoft's delivering to you in that SaaS model. So put your questions in there in the Q&A. If you haven't done that, we're about to open it up on some of those questions, and Chris on our team is going to tee up some questions. But just in closing, you know, here's an analyst firm that really kind of looked at this broader topic of controlling your Office 365 data. You can grab this report from Veeam. The link to this will go out in the email as well, the follow-up email that you'll get. But the biggest common misconception, maybe you got this sense before you registered for this webinar, and that's why you clicked on the webinar, is that, you know, people thought that the data in Microsoft Office tools was totally backed up and was managed to the degree that they wanted it managed to. And, you know, what we're finding out is, nope, that's not actually the case. And so hopefully we showed you, you know, through some resources on Microsoft's site that, hey, you know, even Microsoft says that's not the case. If you want to manage your data to the degree that you feel like your business needs to manage it, then you got to take control of it yourself. So we'll give you this link to this research piece as well. So before we get into Q&A, last thing I just wanted to show you. So this is actually a little higher now, but want to bring it back around to this cause again and say, hey, we did a lot together. It's pretty cool, almost $4,000 that we're going to donate to Feeding America in their effort to, bring resources to places during this pandemic that they do. And I just want to encourage you again, if you get the opportunity, look for some causes that are working in your community to that end, and see what you can do to volunteer with a mask on or give some money to support that stuff. So, Chris, do we got any questions that we can field, that Justin and I can field before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I'm answering a couple questions that have come in currently. I had a question that asks if Veeam does G Suite. Unfortunately, Veeam doesn't have any integrations or any plans to do G Suite at this time. Let's see what else we've got.
Good question.
Yeah, good question. How long can I retain data? So the sky's the limit. We've got as long as you want to retain data, we can protect it. So we've got we can take that offline and talk about what your RTOs and RPOs are and find the best way to protect your data there.
Yeah, and that's I'm going to interject right there and say, as you Google other solutions, as you find other things, you might find a lot of businesses just want to deliver this in the SaaS model. So they still might be owning some of that process for you. We like to be able to separate, kind of slice off, I mentioned before, the licensing. So you actually buy a license per user. That's usually the case with all these. And then you buy storage. Those are two kind of separate functioning things. So if a business says, hey, we only have like 100 users or something, and we want to keep stuff forever, they might need more storage. And if we slice that off, then we can help them pay less for something where they only have 100 users, but they have, maybe it's 40 terabytes worth of data that they want to keep, or eventually, so yeah, great question, great point. You can keep stuff forever, or you can set a retention policy and say, hey, at our company, we don't care. After 5 years, it's done.
See what else we've got.
I see one in here from Beth. How many service accounts or agents would you recommend to back up 1,000 mailboxes and have the Veeam backup job complete in less than 24 hours? That's a great question. I think I'm going to defer to my friends Justin and Chris on this, but I think 1,000 mailboxes is 1,000 licenses. If we're doing per mailbox, right, which we are. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I think we can, okay, confirmed on that. And then I think we can back that up. That'll depend on how we configure the server, right, guys?
Yeah, it really comes down to what the change rate is in your O365 instance. So it's pretty much just basic math at that point. So if I'm changing 5 gigs a day or something like that, whatever it takes to download 5 gigs is pretty much how long it's going to take. Typically, seeing the daily increments, probably not going to have the job run for more than an hour or so, unless it's a particularly busy day. So it's kind of hard to answer in definitive, but it should be fairly quick once we've done the initial full.
Yeah, good question.
Oh, who do we see as, this could be probably for either Justin or Dirk, who do we see as the primary competitor to Veeam for Office 365 backup, and what is Veeam's primary advantage?
Whew.
Yeah, I'm not sure for a primary, the ones I encounter the most are usually people just unsatisfied with their particular. So when I'm talking to someone, they're usually coming to me because they're not happy with their current solution. And a lot of times it's like a Barracuda one or like a Mimecast or something. Usually the lower tier free ones. I would say the advantage of our product is ease of use and also the efficiency of it and the customizability. Really, you can go through and grab any amount of data. You can grab it all. You can grab subsets. You can put it anywhere. Any kind of repo will work. Then you can export anything. So you can push it back where it came from. You can go to a secondary Exchange server or on-prem. You can save things as PSTs and messages. You can go and push it back to the top of someone's inbox or someone else's. Really, once you've got that data, you have a plethora of restore options, and that's one of our main advantages over the competitors. Is just once you got that data, you can put it pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, I would echo that and say I used the word robust a couple minutes ago, but it's that granular management of the data that we've seen in Veeam that we haven't seen anywhere else. I'll give you one name of a competitor that was out there called Druva that we saw Veeam compete against, and that was the issue. Like I think they tested Veeam for a month and a half. They tested Druva for a couple weeks and said, there's no comparison. We can't manage near the granularity that we can in Veeam. So it's kind of that category of things you don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like you plug the solution in and then you find out like months down the road, oh, you know what would be cool is if I could do that thing. And with Veeam, like what we've seen is that they always answer that question like, yep, you can do it. It's right here. Where we've seen some other things, and typically they end up being a little cheaper, but not always, but where those providers can't answer that. So hopefully that helps.
The guy who asked the question said the correct answer was actually the Veeam free webinars.
Nice.
I will piggyback on that and say that there are some 365 competitors that have a hardware option, and the advantage of Veeam is the ability to scale infinitely, whereas with the hardware option, you've got some lock-in, you've got that CapEx expense, you've got the hardware replacement in a couple of years, or if you outgrow your box, you have to pay for that additional hard drive space, whereas with us and Veeam, you just pay for what you consume.
Good point. Yep, really good point. Cool. I saw one on there about HIPAA. I know there's some healthcare customers on here, or maybe they'll get maybe they didn't jump on, but they'll get this because they registered. And yes, there's definitely we can maintain HIPAA compliance with a solution like this. So that's one area that Virtual Systems has a lot of experience. Actually, and I'm going to plug another webinar right now because Virtual Systems and Veeam are doing a healthcare webinar coming up July. But both, of course, I'm going to toot our own horn, but Veeam also excellent job in maintaining compliances as we roll out these solutions. So good question. Any others, Chris?
Yeah, just had one come in about Microsoft Teams, especially with more people moving to collaboration software as we're working from home and trying to struggle to talk with each other. So yeah, Teams, OneDrive is all part of I think the journaling through Teams is done through SharePoint. So yep, SharePoint backup, the Teams backup, OneDrive, Exchange, everything is included in this one single license. So there aren't any different tiers of licensing, one user, one license. Yep, it's all covered.
Good question. I mean, I think you can, Justin, maybe you can weigh in too, but I think even your video calls, if you decide to record those and store those in Teams, which Virtual Systems uses Teams, I know Veeam also does, I think all that data also will stay in and get backed up and saved through that Veeam license.
Yeah, typically a lot of the Team stuff is just going into a SharePoint, going into Exchange. So if you're ever looking like a Teams chat, that's just a PSD. Like you can go and see Team XYZ chat, restore that. All the documents and things like that get stored in a OneDrive. So yeah, we're just grabbing all that anyway. So we're grabbing all the Team stuff too.
Yeah. Good. Anything else? That's it on Q&A. Chris, no more?
We've got Justin. Any issues with the government Office 365, or does it work with the same as the enterprise side?
Ooh, I don't work in SledgeFed. Let me double check. I don't believe there's any issues. Let me see. Yeah, we do have
government clients using it.
We do have the DoD and non-DoD options. Oh, we also have China and Germany. Apparently, they have their own separate zones. Yeah, so we support all those.
Yep, I haven't seen any issues come up, and I'm not speaking from knowing this answer very deeply, but broadly, I'll say we've got government clients, and I haven't seen any issues come up for them. Well, good. So that'll be it for today. Hey, just want to say appreciate you coming again. I'll turn on my video one more time. Appreciate everybody jumping in on this webinar, and especially for being part of this thing, helping out Feeding America. And we'll do some, keep your ears out for some more webinars from Veeam and Virtual Systems, and we'll get this this data out to you via email in the next few days, as well as the survey, just kind of looking for your thoughts on how well we did this one and if we could do anything better. So thank you again for attending. We'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. All right, have a good day.